All right, everybody, welcome. This is called Caminos, Prosperos. It's part of the MAC's Holistic Wellness Program. The MAC is, it's to serve the Latino community and all the communities of Austin. Of course, this workshop's open to everybody, so we're glad to see everyone's face today. We're going to tell you a little bit more about ourselves later, but I'll say for now, my name's Alberto. I'm kind of just here in my own capacity to help, and I'll you introduce yourself, Sarah.
My name's Sarah Rucker. With my Full Gallop is my one-woman company, and I'm honored to have Alberto invite me.
Yeah. And so just like what I want to do, we'll tell you more about ourselves in a little bit, is what we want to go around the room. You can pass if you're feeling a little shy or it's not your thing, public speaking, but we just want to make room because this workshop is going to be us hearing from you about what's working, what's not. So we want to make this sort of a mutual learning experience. We're not trying to be 100% experts or thought leaders up here or anything like that. Okay, so this is me. I sort of have a consultancy where I just work with creative communities doing, I guess you call it creative placekeeping, doing advisement to philanthropy in the arts, and just kind of doing stuff like this in community. So I also happen to be the Chief Operating Officer at Fractured Atlas, which is a national organization that creates tools and technology to serve artists. Kind of the core business is fiscal sponsorship, which we're going to touch on but not cover today. So that's me, but more importantly, I'm just here to serve because I think we have an incredible community, and I think we are each other's best resource a lot of the time. So, yeah.
What are your pronouns?
Oh, thank you. He, him pronouns. Thank you for calling me in. Appreciate it. Sarah.
And I'm she, her pronouns, and I wrote down my answer to the question we made you all ask as well, that my gift is connecting people, connecting projects. So I primarily am an event producer. I can go by many names, but I do also consider myself an artist in that respect. I used to be a dancer, and I also work with a lot of musicians and visual artists. So I spent many years in the nonprofit sector and then in the for-profit sector working with artists like on PR and stuff, and then started my own business in 2015.
Yep.
So freelancing, moving into now I have an LLC, so I'm kind of stepping along in that way. So great to see you all and have a mix of different genres of art and backgrounds.
Sarah's super humble.
I know.
She's supported some incredible cultural events and traditions in this city, and that's why I'm so excited for y'all to meet her and to bring her expertise into the room. A little more about where I came from before Fractured Atlas. My last gig before that was working for NALAC, the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, deputy director, grant making, professional development stuff. Prior to that, I ran the city's cultural arts funding program and sort of got the cultural funding review process going. I know there's a lot of opinions out there on how that goes, but I think if we work with that process, it's going to go well. But that's just a little bit to tell you that. And then I've also worked in, this was my first gig in Austin, managing this good old space here. So hopefully the Dougherty actually gets a new space soon. When I came in 2014, that was the idea. But sometimes things move slow, yeah? But thank you all again for being here. And we're going to get into just what we're going to be covering today. So we know that grant seeking is really important, yeah? We know that these other things, but we want to not commit to anything that we're not going to cover. But that's kind of the purpose of these links that we have in front of y'all today. We also, I'm going to follow up with a set of additional links. So again, please make sure you leave your email, because between the two of us, we've been around for a minute and we want to share those resources for you to explore on your own. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we mean by this?
Yeah, and
that's okay.
Yeah, so on the grant side, I'm not sure we'll dive in more to what brought you all to this room today and that, but we're not going to get heavily into grant writing or grant seeking, but we did provide some resources, as Alberto said, and there are, let's see, I'm just going to refer to that list. So on that kind of handout of URLs and stuff, there are local, state, regional, and national grantors. So that's kind of the first step if you want to go the grant route for fundraising for your projects. And so that's just kind of like a super baseline, here's the website, so you don't have to start from Google. That's just kind of I just scratched that first level off for you. But and then in a minute, Alberto's going to talk a little bit about fiscal sponsorship. Again, just base level probably today, but if you don't already have an affiliation with a nonprofit, and many grants want you to, then that's a route for you to apply for those. And then moving into professional development side of things, I recommend, if you are not familiar with Americans for the Arts, that's when I was in my 20s and early into arts administration and working at nonprofits in Austin, I was told about that. And quick story, I went to the national conference, which was in San Antonio that year, and met a colleague who I then later that year helped start Austin Emerging Arts Leaders, which is the Austin chapter of that. So there's a local version of Americans for the Arts basically living here, and it's a resource for arts administrators and individual artists. We started it because there was no networking group for arts administrators, and that's a niche that some of you may be in as well, or you're just managing your own careers, and that makes you an arts administrator. So they have a mentorship program. It's an interesting program that they have built up because they give a stipend to both the mentor and the mentees. So depending on where you're at, you might want to look into that. And they just have networking opportunities and other workshops. I put on this list the New Philanthropist. That's an organization that I love. It's been around, I think, 5 or 7 years. They're not primarily in the arts, but they help educate people on how to diversify their boards, how to place people of color on boards, and how to just educate people in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a whole range of things like that. I just love them. And then, again, just City of Austin workshops, MAC workshops, a lot of things you can find in that respect. So we'll maybe bounce back to fiscal sponsorship.
Yeah, I will add, like, so the good thing is, if this is your first city workshop, there's lots out there. You know, there's economic development department. So cultural arts division is under economic development, and they have some good sort of just business starting classes. I think they offer one focused on artists, but I think I don't know when it opens again. I think it might be closed. So there's plenty of resources. Again, when we follow up with you, a lot of this will be in links for you to explore. But this is not the only thing. This is kind of, think of this as like kind of come into the well. So fiscal sponsorship. So I kind of just get the resources are going to be there, but a lot of times, if you are seeking grants, you know, the funders will require that you have attachment to some sort of 501c3 nonprofit. There's options out there. Sometimes it can be as simple as someone who cuts the checks for you and receives the checks, right? And sort of in your name and transfers those funds to you. A lot of times they'll charge a percentage. And I'm not going to like tell you like where to go or who to talk to, but I just say that's like the bare minimum, you guys. So if someone's cutting checks for you and that's the only thing they're doing and they're taking 10% of your grant money, you might want to think about it, you know? And also, do they understand your needs? Are they getting your money to you efficiently? So where I work, we're kind of like a full-scale service, right? And we have, I think, over 1,500 plus projects. So we've got the tools. Now that's not to take a jab at local fiscal sponsors that do this work, whether they're arts or not. Some really know what they're doing. Some are there to support you and help you out. Some actually like incubate arts groups together. Like, oh, I'm going to get sort of similar arts groups and organize showcases. So it's kind of a broad category, but I think the main thing I want to get across as you do research it later is get your money's worth. That's your money that you're earning as an artist, okay? Yes, they're performing a service, but please make sure that they're giving you what you need, right? And that there's a lot of options, from super full, robust fiscal sponsorship to like, oh, they're just going to cut the checks and stay out of my way, right? So yeah, that's what I want. Is there any questions? We're kind of going a little fast. Anything? All right, check in, going once. And then what I wanted to put in your hands is, I know there's like a lot of, how do I say this? I'm super invested in anti-racism, anti-oppression work, right? I know not everyone has a comfort with that. That's the idea. It's okay, you know? And so what I wanted to do is put a primer in your hands that has some definitions, so that when you're applying for grants or you're working with communities that are different than yours, you maybe have some resources to make sense of all this stuff, right? So it's just a starting point. We're not going to get super deep into that. There's plenty of great resources in terms of being an artist or someone that moves in a spirit of racial equity, social equity, including people with disabilities in your practice or how you present. But I think that's something really important, at least to my values, that I wanted to at least get you on the road on or give you some resources to. And then finally, this is sort of another thing that will be included in the links that we send you. Some artists are organizing themselves into cooperatives, or have, right, to conduct their business and earn their revenue. That's nothing that's so common in Texas, but there is models to do that. There's ways to approach that, and we provided some resources. And then there's, with the sort of rise of blockchain technology, some artists are organizing their cryptocurrency and blockchain sort of, approaches to funding their own work together, right? So that's kind of the future. I'm not an expert into it. I think it's really interesting because I think it gives artists a little more control and autonomy, not necessarily going for all the grant seeking. It's just another way to sort of make the revenue. Yeah, cool. So we covered the things we said we weren't going to cover. So let's carry on. So what we're hoping to do, y'all, is kind of to get some conversation going, and what would be great is if you came with somebody and you know each other really great and you really want to stick together, that's fine. But if you could pair with someone maybe you know less, you might have a richer conversation with these questions. So did you want to give the first question now?
Oh, yeah, sure. So we are going to cover these two questions just to get to know you, as Alberto said. Mm-hmm. When and where have you felt success or meaning when it comes to generating revenue to do your creative and artistic work?
So we really want you to think about, it's not about oh, I'm a wild success, or I'm paying off 2 houses with my art. We know that's not what we're looking for. We want to dig into what you feel works for you and what has meaning for you in terms of getting resource for your work.
Feel free to jump up with any answer of either of these questions, but does anyone want to volunteer and speak on conversations that were had? Speak on your own behalf, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, things that stood out to you, things you shared or things you heard that seemed surprising or relevant to you, things you connected with. Yeah, please.
Very similar questions. Well, what about this? How do you get money? How do you get onto a website? How do you do the money part? Mm-hmm. People are a lot of good stuff. So that's very common with us. We're on 3 different stages of where we are in the journey, but we all still have the same question.
Technical questions about getting to the money. Yeah. I hear you.
I know. That's true. Yeah.
Yes, please, back here.
Oftentimes, you have to have, for example, we work together and we do our artistic and creative work teaching, in Montessori schools, nonprofits, and then that kind of that revenue streams into the personal side of the artistic. And we really haven't really pursued grants as much and things like that because they're difficult, they're long to write, and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. Trying to find a patron that will sponsor you who really likes your work is not also very conducive. So we feel that if you do the work you love, showing what you can do with art, and then in return the revenue comes and then it allows us to be creative.
I appreciate that, and I think there's probably more than a few people in the room that have been teaching artists at some point, going to work in this school for that nonprofit, taking your arts, and that's hard. It can be the pay can be good, right? And then, but you got to pay for your own gas, your own equipment. Come tax time, you're like, oof, right? So that is a great way to diversify the revenue. But I also know that being a teaching artist can be really tough, right? Heading around the different spaces. Yeah. Anything else, please? Yeah.
One thing that I said was, where I feel successful with my art is very different from where the meaning from it. Yeah. So for the last 20 years, I have been selling online, and I'm very successful selling my art online, but I don't have that connection with people, and so sometimes there's the meaning of it is lost on me. So what I really thrive for, what I really yearn for is, again, connection and with other artists and other people, collectors. But I think when we were talking, it seemed like we need that art community and a way to connect and share our experiences with each other.
Thank you. Community is powerful and it can pay off too. and over here in the front, in the middle, some comments or some insights. Would love to hear you.
Oh, one thing that we were kind of talking about is the idea that if you find a kinship with another artist who's maybe like at a more progressed state of their career, and they like have a show at a nonprofit, look at the wall and see who's paying for that. If it's someone who's gotten funding from the National Endowment for the Arts through the Freedom of Information Act, you can request any grant from the NEA.
That's right.
From any artist, and just never start with a blank page. Someone has already like done that work, and if it's someone you're inspired by, whether they know it or not, they want to help you, and that's a great resource.
What a great piece of advice. And I think, I don't know if they'd be happy about me saying it, but you can do that on the city level too, because there's a public information request process. It takes a little while. But yeah, you could ask for like, what's a winning grant in my genre? And I'm pretty sure they'll hook you up. It may not be fast.
Yeah, no, it's actually not fast.
Okay.
But if you have a hard time translating what you do, if you're an artist, you're
That's
a
right.
visual person, if you're a musician, if you have a hard time articulating that into the written word, then look at what someone else has already done, taking their work and translating it to the written format. No, I think they make it purposely a long process, so you have to plan ahead.
Thank you for that. Anything else in the middle room here? Yeah, please.
I'm just happy to be here. I was inspired already by talking to these two ladies. I was letting them know where they're at is somewhere that I would want to be, even though they're completely two different. But I'm on this side over here, just creating, but never intended to even sell anything or creating it for the purpose of selling. But now that I kind of want to venture out and be a little braver about it, it's really comforting to hear them, just their experiences and where they're at right now. It encourages me.
Excellent. Thank you. Front area, is there anything burning or reflections you have to offer?
Well, I'll start this. Definitely as a filmmaker, I've done films and we're trying to run a first film festival. So we are definitely interested in having that support. Like, we want to provide a successful experience for the artists, for the community, and hopefully we want, like say, grants or sponsorship just to provide that event expectation. As a filmmaker, we've gone to so many, we've seen some successful ones and some that are not. And it's that challenge, how do they manage to keep it going? So that's where we are, where fine, we know what makes it work, but how to find that financial aspect to keep it going. Hopefully that'll be our success. That's our challenges and our success. So hopefully transitioning from filmmakers to film festival runners.
There you go. Thank you for that. Thank you. Anyone else in the front want to add anything at all? That's okay if you don't. No forcing. No forcing nobody here. None of that. To set a little scenery here, y'all, we told you like kind of what we weren't going to dive into. But what we did is each of us has, some good, strong relationships in the city with different artists. And we just reached out to some artists and asked them kind of similar questions, like what's working for you, what feels meaningful, what pays off, if you will. And so we kind of looked at case studies. So it may not be your medium, it may not be your artistic practice, but we're hoping some of the things they shared make sense to you, and maybe you can think about incorporating into how you're approaching the work. So we'll get started.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so the first person, you might have seen her work around town. She's a wonderful human being. Her name is Carmen Rangel, and she kind of goes by this pseudonym, Viva la Painter. So she's got a bunch of really cool commissions around town. I've been noticing she's been increasing, how much she's exhibiting. I think she got a deal with Siete Foods recently too. So I noticed that she's also making a lot of different things. Like she does custom hats and she does murals and stuff. So I interviewed her, and I'm sorry, y'all, that this is so tiny. I thought we were gonna have a much bigger screen. So please accept my apologies. I'm gonna do some reading from the PowerPoint. It's a cardinal sin, and I'm sorry. But when I asked her, what is sort of the key to your approach, she talked about being versatile as an artist, and that trying different mediums out, even though it can be stressful, maybe a little maybe challenging or vulnerable, that it expands her creativity and network. So she didn't just stick with the muralists. She started looking at the people working on doing textiles, putting their designs on clothing, making relationships with different like nonprofit types of people exhibiting work, private business. And when she said, I asked her, how did you do this? She talked about researching online and reaching out to others for advice when you're doing something new or unfamiliar. And she said what helped with that is that it builds community and alleviates the anxieties of stress of exploring something new alone. Shout out to you over there. And I think, but when she explained this, it maybe sounds like a little touchy-feely, but by building these relationships, she just expanded her opportunities and not just sticking with murals. She started creating relationships and seeing how people function and worked. And what she told me on the phone was, sometimes what started happening was when people didn't want to take commissions that either they didn't have the time for, or that they didn't maybe resonate with the project, or that they thought she was a better fit. She was just getting references from other artists, right? So maybe it's a little obvious, but I think it was helpful. And then I asked her, what are the challenges of your sort of the approach? She says that, creating consistent income is the most challenging aspect of the artistic practice, period. But the versatility helped because she said, for example, if I'm waiting on a mural payment or a commission to come through, that's a good time where I can maybe lead some workshops on your given medium, try some events, selling prints, or just jumping on projects with other artists who maybe were the lead muralist on a project. And that she had those relationships, so she just wasn't waiting for the next check to come through every single time. And she said that it actually just helped her practice expand. Like she was making things that she thought were cooler and more meaningful. Something that I thought was interesting was she said she went to St. Ed's, and I think she majored in studio art, but I think she said halfway through she shifted to, I think, marketing, and that she kind of changed her attitude. And she said, it's about the message that I'm getting across with my art. And that's what, I guess, speaking to this next part, she says, the messages I'm making and with my artwork and the people and orgs and businesses I work with help make my approach meaningful and impactful, right? So her clients, if you will, were really aligned with, I think, her values and her aesthetics in some ways. And then that's what she said, aligning with values and morals. And she talked about, I thought this was really cool. She said, the subject matter of my work is also very important because it focused on things that I love. Nature, culture, representation, and wanderlust. And I promise you, if you go look at her work, you're going to see those keywords pop out to you, right? Like, so, maybe if there's time you have to think about what are like the keywords that, what do I love about the work that I'm doing, right? And if those keywords can inform how you're going about the work and who you're connecting with, that can help, right? And then as far as, I asked any offerings, for people in a similar position. And what she said is, failure is always a learning experience. Sounds very philosophical, but I think it's true. And she really emphasized, try new mediums, styles, and subject matter, and build that community that you can, that there is people willing to support. I also asked, I did ask her, I'm like, so what about the flake factor? When you're working with clients or other artists, she says that actually being in community also helped in that regard because you kind of got people's number, right? The people that are trying to hit you up, like, make a mural for exposure, or like, exposure doesn't feed artists, right? And I'm going to be honest and say there's a lot of that in this town, and I don't think anyone should have to tolerate that. Yeah. Any questions about this or anything that popped out to you about Carmen's sort of profile, if you will? Yeah, please.
Just a comment, I really liked sort of the focus on like community building. So like we hear a lot like networking, but I think we could just like take that and replace it with community building, and that would be like a better model for like doing work in the world, and that sort of like connection with others. It's not about like what opportunity you can get, but like what you can contribute, right? And I liked that, how she phrased it.
Totally. And I acknowledge like this is not easy. Like some people have social anxiety or, and like if you have that buddy who's a little, more comfortable in social settings, like partner up with people. It's really a lot to ask people like, go out there and get it. That's not at all what I'm saying, right? Like your community, if you're someone who's disabled, might be other, people that share that disability. If you're a more just not as, more nonverbal person, there's community out there for you. So I don't want to like say, be all phony and act like that's easy either, Yeah. Anything that jumps out to you about this profile? Things that you connect with or? disconnect with, push back on? Please.
I think it's the simplicity of finding the teamwork. I think that's important in the beginning. Like if you find yourself in the beginning and you follow, you must present it to everybody else. Because we're always trying to look at ourselves and our lives and everything that we got to shift like this to our audience and what we want them to see from us. That's what I want. I love it when somebody just explains things. Very.
I really connected with that too, because artists, you're always kind of, especially if you're doing client work, kind of shaping yourself to that person's need, their desires, what they're projecting on you, right? And if you have a couple of strong keywords, maybe you filter out that, and maybe it hurts the pocket for a little bit, but I think you end up doing the work that actually makes meaning for you, Yeah, please.
I really like how she emphasized trying new mediums, trying new things, get out of your comfort zone, and something surprising might happen.
Yeah, and across mediums, like maybe you're a long form filmmaker working on some shorts or working on some clips for someone that feel good to you, that feel like they're up to your aesthetics and quality, right? Hopefully this you guys can see how this would translate to your given medium, Yeah. I'm going to move on unless there's any more questions. Okay, so anyone here listen to the Night Owl podcast? Any Texas ghost story fans? So Steve and I used to work together at Creative Action, and I saw him hatch this idea at the coffee table, and it's like nationally, it's a very, very well followed podcast. I think it's won like 3 years in a row, the Austin Chronicle's best podcast, and I even once got to do some research with him on a spooky story. So it's been a lot of fun, and I think he's just a stand-up guy, and I was really happy to interview him too and share some of the things that he came up with. So the gist of it is the Night Owl is focused on Texas paranormal stories, right? Anyone watch the spooky on the Discovery Channel or History Channel? Have you seen those shows? Yeah, so they're pretty bad, right? Like, it's like a lot of the time, these a bunch of guys walk around in tactical gear, and they're like, "Oh, did you feel that?" Like that's like the whole show, and it's pretty boring. But this is deep research. It's really fun. It's a lot tied to history, and the hook of it is there's always like some personal transformation. So I feel like it's less about the spooky, but it really narrows in on people's stories that are experiencing these things, which I think is maybe key to the success. But can we go forward, please?
Yeah, he's a good storyteller.
He is, right? I know. Okay. And so I asked Steven, what is your key strategy? So some of y'all know he does events. He's got the merch. He's got, he has, I think, some ad revenue that comes in. But what he said is crowdfunding is number one. And he uses Patreon for that. All right? So he says that he used Patreon to activate this large following that he's built with the show. It's the only consistent ongoing stream of revenue for the show since the very beginning. So I think he still holds a day job, but I think he, for especially an independent local podcast, pretty strong Patreon presence, right? And so I asked him, well, how do you go about it? And he said, what it is tapping into a need within the paranormal community. And I thought that is so smart. And he said, this community is like, he said, devout and diehard, right? So maybe like, what's the devout and diehard for what you do, And he said, creating the Patreon, like give people a direct way to show support for the show and keep it alive. And then in the Patreon, he's sort of segmented it into these like exclusive offerings, right? So I think for me, this is like diversity is the law of nature. And I think it makes sense in what you offer people. So I said, what are the kind of things that people that sign up for Patreon get? They get bonus cut audio from the episodes, right? And I think he said he does that on his iPhone. It's hard, but it makes sense. Video walkthroughs of the candid locations and live streams with virtual live streams, Q&As, early access to new merch, tickets, events. And he said that what key is that this show is like really unique and rare, and it's extremely hard to produce. Like I've seen him try to do it. It's extremely hard. The amount of editing, making sure the stories are legit that get submitted, coordinating with the haunted people, like all the things. But he said that the fans are just really so into it that they're more than willing to help support him. They're dying for the next show. And he tells them every show, hey, you're my people, help me get there, I hope that doesn't feel yucky or pandering to anyone because I think it's a genuine connection to the community, right? If you're not offering anything that they resonate with, then it's probably, going to feel that way for both you and them, right? And so, yeah, they go to the page to offer the support that they can. And I asked him, what's the most challenging thing about this approach? And he says, it's the time to put together some of the bonus content, to coordinate some of the merch and the sort of exclusives. But he said that the financial support is needed by creating these things to keep the show going, so he makes it happen. And I think what he said, I adapted by just making sure what I promised to this community is not too demanding on me, right? And he told me, like, he does these really cool haunted tours at Pioneer Farms. Loves them, they're not a moneymaker. So that's like the heart of it, right? And I think that builds the connection to the community. But maybe you're doing something where it's all those events, right? Taking a lot of energy from yourself, not a lot of return on investment. So I think this is just an example of diversifying your approach, and also not being scared to approach your people to show their value for what you do. Yeah?
I want to add, I think what's key to this case study on the crowdfunding side is that, for instance, I work a lot in the music business, and I hear musicians ask all the time, what's Patreon, how do I do it? And I've heard people on my side say, learn what it is before you just jump in, because the key to this case study is that he knew who the audience was. Right. So I guess back to the point of why we are here today is not to give you some, like, reveal any secrets that right. you may not already know, but to show what are the steps someone did to find a fundraising method.
Yeah.
What are the first questions?
And we try to focus on people that are just here in Austin. So that was another part of it too, right? And he did say, though, like, Patreon is not like a panacea, right? It's a strategy. And he said it kind of works if you have a large following, because if you're trying to cut bonus audio and you're only pulling in like $100, like, a month, because you don't have enough, general supporters, that it can be really tough, right? So you kind of end up in a similar place for doing a lot of work for less return, if you will. But I just think this was like, these are two artists that really showed a genuine connection to the community and thinking about what they want and going out of their comfort zone, right? This guy, he's a filmmaker too, actually. He started in film and just loved the storytelling aspect, but really connected in terms of the podcast to the community.
I really like the way that needs to focus on a super niche, because sometimes we want to do so many things, and we were so creative that everything was great, but you focus so much on that. Find that community that is only focused on that. And for what you're saying about like the sharing that information is part of the campaigning also.
That's right.
Because then they feel involved in it, and yourself, they don't feel like they just don't know. They contribute and they're part of that niche.
And I think like people, artists, like you're talking about peer community of artists, but I know from the work I do that artists are really yearning for each other again after what we've collectively been through the last few years, So I think that's something to think about, thinking about when you do your work, tapping into what people are yearning for and what you're yearning for ideally. Yeah.
So to segue into some case studies, I had a less in-depth approach to the case studies than Alberto had, and I'm jealous of his time with these artists having interviews. Most of the people in my communities are prepping for the busy fall season of events. So this next one is kind of like giving a little more insight to the sheet that we passed out that has grant opportunities and other resources, just diving in a little bit more to one specific thing as an example of finding something that is hard to Google, as somebody said. So if you're not familiar with this organization, the organization is called Future Front. It started as Boss Babes, and so they evolved and modified their name, and over the last, again, I think they're about 6 or 7 years old, have become a nonprofit, and it was started by a woman named Jane Claire Hervey. She is originally from the Valley, Rio Grande Valley, and she is an artist herself. She does music, she does poetry, and probably a lot of other things, and I've worked alongside her a lot in different capacities. So I'm kind of speaking off the cuff right now, but she was not able to do the interview because they have Future Front Festival, is a big multi-day festival that's coming up the first week of September. So as an organization, they have several opportunities for networking. If you have time, please go to their website because they have a lot of different types of offerings. And their mission is all about building community and really like relevant to this conversation today because they're just, her reason for founding it and immediately like building it into like a sort of, I wouldn't say committee structure, but a cooperative structure is to build community and to spread that exponentially. But I'll be honest, when I first heard about Boss Babes, I was like, I'm too old for that. Like I thought it was like because they were starting these networking events and they were like filling like these huge rooms.
And they're very, very cool, so it's intimidating.
Well, yeah, cool artist people. And I went to one, it was packed, and I am the antisocial, or I'm the, what did you say? Not antisocial, but I'm the more nonverbal person that he mentioned. So if you haven't noticed already. So I went, I'm like not talking to anyone. But then I kind of just like did my thing of observing and observed more without going to the big events and going to some smaller events. And they really did grow their programming and create smaller events. And they always got feedback from the people attending. And they've just grown into this great organization called Future Fund. So they now actually have a mini grant. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to mention it. It may not be relevant for you to apply to or anything like that, but I think it's a great example of something you can find, and really it's just the story and why they have it that I wanted to share, because it's a $1,000 grant. That may be a lot or not enough for anything you do, but they're not a huge organization. They're growing and growing and growing from the ground up, and they give 10 $1,000 grants per year to women or LGBT creative projects. So there's no strings as far as like needing to be with a 501c3 or anything like that. It's just an annual application, and by the way, I know a lot of these things because I have been in Austin for 22 years, but I'm just now doing this stuff for myself. And I relate to a lot of things that people have spoken up about their lives and artistic practices because I've had 9-to-5s for a long time, and I just learned a little bit from each one, and now I'm here trying to produce my own events and not just other people's work. But so yeah, that's just more about that mini grant and how it came about. Oh, the part that I missed is that, so she started the mini grant program because she put $1,000 from her savings to start the nonprofit. So that was like the story behind what they call the Creative Future of I messed it up. Creative Future of Texas Fund. And so that's her way to give back.
Can I add a little?
Of course, please.
So the other cool thing about Jane and formerly Boss Babes Future Fund is I used to work for the city funding, right? And so I remember when they were just starting up and applying for funding themselves. But what I think they saw that, the truth of the matter is, like, unlike, I'll be really like real, like the coasts, the sort of West Coast and the East Coast, and arguably like sort of the Northeast, have like really developed philanthropic community for the arts.
And Canada.
Right? Very organized. It's a little more organized. Here, everything's a little more entrepreneurial in Texas. There's a lot of bootstraps. It's a lot of free market. So the hustle is hard here in Texas, like make no bones about it. So a lot of folks that I think find success kind of create their own funds. And that's what I respect about what they did. They said, okay, we're working with, women going to a lot of some of these vendor spaces, some of them probably creepy or unsafe, right? And so they did something that worked for their niche, their community. And then shortly after, they started recognizing the needs among all these different artisans, crafters, and saying, let's create a fund that works for us too, and helps the people that we're working with. So they're just a really remarkable group, and I even know that when I worked for the city, we contracted with them to get the word out about funding opportunities because of the reputation that they came with and the integrity that they had with their community. So yeah, they're really awesome.
And then oops, my photo didn't come through.
Why don't we just go back to the other photo of you?
No.
She's here.
Okay. Anyway, so Alberto forced me into giving myself as a case study, but I will be echoing a lot of what you all said and what some of the artists that he interviewed said. Oh, yay. Okay, because I wanted to mention this, but so again, we're not here to give like get rich quick secrets, but I'm just hoping like part of my story can relate and help you, get set up for future opportunities. Again, my forte is in event production, but kind of like going back to one of, was it Carmen said in that case study, I at some point, probably around the time when I started freelancing on the side of 9-to-5s, I heard this in some circle, but to create my own mission statement. And it's kind of what some people said about like relating to like just either choosing some words to put on your work or getting deeper and saying what do I represent and what and who do I speak up for. And so my kind of, tagline to put in marketing speak was bridging cultures and connecting communities, because anything I enter into, especially now as an entrepreneur, I try not to think of making money first. I know that sounds very like maybe privilege or something, but I am an artist at heart, and I've just never strived to make a lot of money in my life. So I think about, who are the people that I'm about to collaborate with? What are they doing? And so through that, and kind of back to the case study of Futurefront, is I want the outcome of my events to just not be purely entertainment, but to be community building and just see people connecting and hopefully see that grow into something else. This photo is from an event that I used to help produce called Cherrywood Art Fair. I don't know if anyone remembers that. But it was put on by Chula League, a nonprofit, and it's been kind of shelved, unfortunately, as a project. But I kind of built up the music and dance element of it, because that performing arts is my background, and this is Lanaya, drum and dance, engaging with people. But it's just one thing that I wanted to mention is vendors markets. If you're getting into different mediums of things that could be sold in that sort of environment, it's one little thing I'll throw out there for a way to try different genres, as one of the people, Carmen said. Through producing vendor markets like Cherrywood Art Fair, and I work with Blue Genie Art Bazaar, I have seen people, first of all, there's a wide range of artists there and a wide range of genres. There's products that are not necessarily in the art world, but there is a lot of fine art and whatever, different mediums. And so one thing that I've tried to help with, again, I'm just very behind the scenes in my career, is try to convince some of my artist friends to apply to these vendor fairs. I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning, but for instance, Las Ofrendas, if anyone knows, she's extremely successful, like Frida Fridays. She has all these events and all these products of her own art that she makes still herself, and she's growing her business exponentially, but she had not wanted to do Blue Genie Art Fair because of a variety of reasons. And so I put myself out there to build her trust because we were friends, and now she's in that. And so it's just like trying a little bit of everything. I know her fairly well, and she has so many streams of revenue with her art. If you don't know TK Tunches that does Las Ofrendas, you might want to look up that business, because it's an example of a business that's just kind of like she's got to catch up with her own success, which is amazing. Right. So, but again, just my part, and not claiming credit for anything, but just being like a little nudge for friends to find these things and to just hopefully I help people gain confidence to try things if they had a issue with distrust or something. And then back to, I'm jumping around because I'm going off the cuff, but back to the personal mission statement. So in addition to just wanting to always try to build community, I also have tried harder and harder to look at who I'm working with and what are they doing for the community, even if it's not on the public side, but how they're treating their staff and everything, because I work a lot with nonprofits. Most of my clients as an event producer are nonprofits. And so I did some work, and some of it was slightly affiliated with the city, and really it was just on my own, which was to create a clause for contracts that is called an equity clause, and it's in one of the handouts that's on racial equity. My thought behind this, it came out of the inclusion clause that was made for the film industry several years ago, and it was my foray into trying to speak up on the behalf of others because I'm a white cis female and I'm trying to only work with people that are looking towards a future in racial equity and other forms of equity and inclusion. And so it's a clause that I put into all my contracts, and it was, again, this is right when I was building my freelance business and going out on my own and not having any 9-to-5. So it was scary, and I totally understand the side of things of not wanting to put that in your contract, because what it says is that, and it's honestly, it's pretty kind of light as far as the commitment, but it just gives me an out so that if I see anything going on, no matter what in the spectrum of discrimination it is, I can break my contract and just have a conversation and say, I don't agree with what's happening here, and you're not prioritizing. But there can be a lot of things go wrong in our work, and so again, I offered it up in some of the materials. It's totally like an open source clause that I had a lawyer write for my contracts that was meant for artists. But I do understand. I've had artists say we don't have the privilege of saying no to things, and I understand that, and I have been through that, but I haven't been through everything, and so. I kind of had it written in the way that you can start that conversation, because, anybody can ask me any questions on that later, but it's just something I wanted to put out there because it had to do with creating my personal mission statement. Who am I working with? Who is my audience? Back to that side of things, and what do I believe in, and what will I stand for? So that's kind of all I have to share on making myself a case study.
Can I ask a question? Because
Sure.
I worked with Sarah a few times, and I think something that really stands out to me about you is the way you build community. I feel like you're not a gatekeeper because you're not elevated, but I find that you've done a really great job curating people into spaces that might not otherwise have them. You're a strong advocate, with the Tejano Conjunto festivals. You've gotten great venues for people that I don't think sometimes have gotten it, So I guess the question is, I feel like you bring people together well, and you also get the word out well. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how that connects to generating revenue or, making successful a time of bringing people together.
Well, one thing, I keep going back to the comment here about networking versus community building, is just, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and again, that's just giving context of where I am in my life and my career. But I think of my bread and butter of my business as basically my Rolodex or my network. Rolodex is a sleazy 80s reference, but it's my network, my communities, and what I consider my communities are this intersection of, it might be this guy, or a white male that owns a very large music venue, and a group of artists that totally fit with the music they're presenting at that venue, but they've never gotten an invitation. They've never even been to that venue. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but I would just echo what some people here and some of the other case studies have said, is that building that network and honestly just attending workshops like this and meeting people and attending conferences when I'm able to. I mean, I had to find funding to attend conferences, which many of you can relate to. Whenever I could find a place where I could just meet one or two people, then that built onto that. And I very intentionally early in my career, or even I guess like 15 years ago, started traveling to like New York to the Arts Presenters Conference and things like that. And I would if I worked for a job that gave stipends for professional development, I would go to New York City. And I wasn't partying, I wasn't just like
it's okay if you
blowing their fund. Well, but I wasn't just like spending the money. I was like seeking out like what's my stipend and how's the best I can use those dollars. And so I guess that's my answer, is that just when I start an event, I literally like look at a blank page. What I consider my art is like I list people. I list like collectives or individuals, and I just
map it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just think that what you embody to me is like a gate opener. Like there's a scarcity mentality that I think really doesn't serve Austin. And people kind of get their clients, or they get their little corner, or they get their little grant, and oh man, do they feel like they hold on tooth and nail. But it's like a crop that you only rely on once. Like it just doesn't last, and like I said, there's more abundance, I think, here than people know. Even if we don't have some of the sort of philanthropic support for the arts that some other places have, I think we have each other, and I think that that's pretty valuable. Yeah, any questions, y'all, before we move to sort of the next part where we're going to wrap up? Anything come up for anybody? All right, well, we can move on. So we thought this would be a good final exercise. You can get with the same people you wanted to, but just based on what you heard today from each other, the things we didn't hear y'all said to each other, we kind of tried to create a simple prompt. And what is something that you think you can stop doing? What is something that you can start doing when it comes to attracting revenue to your creative practice? What's something you want to invest in and divest from? So I think stop and start is like very hard, right? Investing and divesting is like, drawing away from it, right? Like if you're investing in, really bad stocks that are, invested in some bad nefarious business, how are you drawing back? Or if you're doing something that isn't serving you, not helping your capacity, how do you divest from that? So you could just, this can be private, and maybe you could just take a moment to sketch this out for yourself on. All right. Well, we're drawing to a close here, and I would love to hear, maybe starting with a few, you can move down your list, you can share one or more, whatever you feel like, but I'd love to hear what people kind of thought about starting, stopping, investing, or divesting from when it comes to your approach to getting revenue for your practice. Any volunteers? Yes, please.
I think for me, I'm going to share my invest in. For me, it's knowledge, growth, and community building. I think that just continuing to grow my knowledge on my creative aspects and my career and everything, and also growing my knowledge on small businesses and like how to run small business. Because I'm a photographer, I know how to be a photographer.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to like market myself, get myself out there. And so I think gaining more knowledge in those areas would be very helpful.
I appreciate that. And there's ways you can absorb all of that. There's also folks out there that probably want to take a little bit of that business load off of you, with some of those fiscal sponsors in particular. So can I ask what your practice is again? Photography. Thank you. Got it. Okay. Thank you so much. Other folks? Yes, please.
All right. Stop doing things all on my own. Start doing things with other artists. Invest in learning something new, and divest from focusing only what I'm comfortable with.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you. Will? Yes, please.
Stop doing 9-to-5 work outside of my 9-to-5.
Amen.
And with that, stop doing perfectionism. Start doing regular appreciation of creative work and community building. invest in my values and divest from work that does not align with them.
There you go. I really appreciate the first thing you said because I manage and have managed so many working artists. And yeah, I like, you really want to do that spreadsheet tonight? Like you're a painter. What are you doing? You know,
I
like
take calls
it's
from
that same attitude though of wanting to do it so right can spill over easily into the 9 to 5 work. So I'm just appreciating you bringing that up.
And I think too, like, it's when other people are asking you for something that's quick and easy to do, like, oh, just check this spreadsheet, right? Like, that's easy and you're not as emotionally invested in like, oh, I, need to grow my creative work that I feel so much more personally tied to, right? That doesn't have a quick checkbox under and you're like done, I think that's part of it as well.
Totally. And it's the why nots. Like, why not is bad once or twice, but when you do like 20 why nots for a bunch of people, that's when it stacks up.
Yeah.
It's like being the friend with the truck. You don't tell everybody. Yeah. Any other insights, y'all, or
I have one for the artists.
Please.
Stop being afraid of writing about your work. Stop overthinking like your artist bio. Keep it true to like how you speak about your work. It doesn't have to be this like art speak. As someone who writes about art and also reads grants, it's a pain to read something that someone is just like kicking out of the thesaurus so that they can make it sound sort of elevated or academic. Like, keep how you represent yourself in the written word as true to how you represent yourself in your work. Because I see that a lot.
Yeah.
You just try too hard
Yes.
in the artist bios, and it comes off as inauthentic. So.
You get lost in the sauce of those long bios.
Oh my gosh, where you're just like, if as a reader you have to start the sentence over, it's like, oh, you've lost me. So.
There's also a range of difficulty with grants, and that's why we tried to throw out just like a range of a list of like National Endowment for the Arts. That's a difficult grant to write. You might get a helper or look at what you said about finding a sample. But then the mini grants, are just a Google form. So I'm totally, I don't know if I already said it, but I'm in that boat myself. I just started my LLC less than a year ago, and I've been doing this stuff 20 years. I was just scared. I thought it wasn't for me. I thought I would never get the grants. I thought I couldn't write the grants. And I just started trying just recently. So,
Texas Commission on the Arts will read your grant. If you get it to them about a month before the deadline, they'll read it for you and give you advice. Like, they want to give you the money.
Yeah, and some fiscal sponsors will review your grants, not necessarily to edit your words, but oh, is your budget looking good? Is this in the right place? Just helping sometimes that bureaucratic review that can be a pain in the ass with grants. So, yeah. Any other thoughts to offer y'all, the group here? Probably let's do 2 more. I don't want to squeeze it out of you, but is there anything else, y'all? And Mac staff, you're included in the community here. If you guys have some insights to share.
I wanted to also add any feedback from us if you feel like giving that, where like I said, I was a dancer for many years. I can take constructive criticism of things hurled my way, including my own image and mirrors over and over. So I don't know if you like that, but email us later.
Don't tell me about it, tell the Mac. I'm just kidding. No, it's in the, no, seriously, y'all, this is something we tried. We kind of stepped out on a limb, to be real. Some of y'all maybe have oh my gosh, I was just trying to figure out how to write grants. I want to know how to start and seed my business. That's not what this was. I acknowledge that. That is available to you, even if that's not what this was. And we do have an interest in connecting you to that. Just want to be straight up about that. And I really, really hope you'll find some of the links useful that we send you. Thank you so much.